right, welcome everyone. I see folks trickling in. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being with us. We'll get started with our webinar in just a moment. Want to give everyone a moment to get situated. Welcome, welcome. So good to see so many of you. Thank you for being here. Oh, awesome. It just keeps ticking up. Well, welcome everybody. Get comfortable. It's going to be a wonderful hour together. I'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Katy Hogan, and I'm a director of workforce programs here at the Partnership for Public Service. For those of you that may not be familiar with the Partnership for Public Service, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit working to build a better government and a stronger democracy. We do that in a number of ways. We accomplish our mission through policy ideas to make government work better, through leadership development programs, workforce programming, and convening conversations like this one to support our federal workforce. We are here to support you as best we can by resource sharing, providing plain language explainers, and continuing to share the stories of the incredible work and necessary work that goes on in the federal government by federal employees. Thank you so much for your service on behalf of all of us at the partnership. I want to share a few notes before we dig into today's panel. Throughout the webinar, we will answer the questions that you submitted when you registered. You can also submit a question tonight live through the Q&A function, and we will work as best we can to get through those as well. Though we may not be able to address every question that comes through today, we will continue to hold FedSupport webinars on a near weekly basis to dig into additional topics. So while we may not get to every topic tonight, be sure to be on the lookout for future webinars in coming weeks. We will also be posting recordings of all of our webinar conversations on our FedSupport website for federal employees. My colleague Kristen will drop the FedSupport link in the chat. Finally, while this discussion is geared towards federal employees, it is an open forum. So we might have folks joining us from other communities. So if that is you, welcome. Thank you for being here. If your question is not answered tonight, or if you have a more specific or individual circumstance, we highly encourage you to reach out to your agency human resources staff or seek legal guidance from your agency or an outside attorney and continue to seek support within your community. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. We're going to warm up with a quick poll to get an idea of who is with us tonight. So my colleague Kristen is going to start our Zoom poll. So please take a moment to answer the 3 questions: where you're located, and we broke down the country into these regions, so whichever most closely aligns with where you are joining us from. How close are you to retirement? And then have you thought about starting your own business? And we'll give you about 15 seconds to go through and answer these. All right, just a couple of moments to get through those questions. For those of you just joining, we're just getting started with a poll. All right, Kristen, do you want to show us the results? Awesome. So we have folks coming to us from all over the place, which is awesome. I see a lot of Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Folks from the Southeast, welcome. Southwest, I'm actually heading to New Mexico tomorrow, so thank you for being here. I hope it's warmer and drier there. We have folks from the West Coast. We have folks from everywhere. This is really exciting. Welcome, welcome to all of you. Okay, how close are you to retirement? So this is also a pretty even spread. So we have folks who are more than a decade, between 5 and 10 years. And we have a quarter of y'all less than 3 years away. And have you thought about starting your own business? So it seems like the vast majority of you have at least thought about it a little bit. That is exciting. All right. Well, thank you so much. It's a fun way to get to know you all. We will navigate back to our webinar. So thank you for that warm up. So I'd like to pivot now to our discussion and introduce our fabulous guests tonight, who are both friends of mine, and I could not think of anyone better than these 2 guests to talk to you about tonight's topic. So to get us started, I'd like to ask them both to introduce themselves to you, tell us a little bit more about who they are and why they're here. So Elisse, I'll ask you to share more about your background first, and then we'll go to Jay, and then we'll get into Q&A.
Hey, thank you, Katy. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Elisse Wright Barnes. I am a JD PhD, not a medical doctor, and I partner with career development and business development organizations, as well as public libraries, to teach individuals 50 and better how to use LinkedIn to pursue job searches, career pivots, Encore entrepreneurship, and nonprofit leadership. I've been doing that for about since 2016. I started my own business. I was sort of forced into it because my husband had a chronic illness that had him going in and out of clinical trials in another state. And in order to be able to accompany him, I realized I would not be able to work a 9 to 5. So I needed to figure out how to work have flexibility in my work, and it turned out entrepreneurship was the correct choice for me. I didn't think I had the entrepreneurial gene. I discovered that I did, and I absolutely love it. It would take a boatload of money, I say, to get me to go back to working for someone else, because I enjoy very much the flexibility and setting my own rate and also choosing my boss, because every time I sign a contract, I am choosing my boss. And if it doesn't work out, when the contract ends, I don't have to stick with them. I really enjoy being an entrepreneur, and am looking forward to this discussion and sharing this platform with Jay to assist all of you.
Thanks, Elise. Jay?
So, Elise, and hi, Elise. I'm sorry. Thank you, Katie. Jay Aronowitz. I retired after 34 years of federal service. Started my federal journey as an intern with the Army right out of graduate school. Spent about 11 years overseas in overseas assignments, so about a third of my time. The rest of the time was really in the national capital region, working at different headquarters levels, as well as being the director of an Army agency out at Fort Belvoir, about 20 miles south of D.C. Had the opportunity to compete for and be selected as a member of the Senior Executive Service. Served in 2 Deputy Assistant Secretary positions, and my final assignment was as the Chief Human Capital Officer for the Army staff in the Pentagon, and that was my very first HR job in my entire career. Even though I was responsible for all the planning, programming, and policy for Army civilians, about 250,000. But throughout my career, what I've found to be the real key to success was to really surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, more intelligent, maybe even a little bit harder working. And they're the ones who really make the organization shine. Retired again after 34 years, and knew that I was going to do something. I was in my mid to late 50s at the time, and started volunteering, and then also started my own business shortly thereafter, which we can get into in the discussion tonight. Did some consulting work with my company, and then also some training and teaching in areas that I really, really enjoy. I've been running my company for about 10 years now, and actually, Katie, I apologize. I almost feel like it's kind of bait and switch. I'm in the process of kind of winding my company down now to focus on some other areas and start the next chapter of my journey. What I would tell the individuals retiring, I went out and actually looked at some of the other FedSupport webinars this weekend to just kind of get a feel for the op tempo of these sessions, and I was actually blown away by the ones that you all have done. And I would highly encourage everyone to go out to the partnership's website and go look at the prior FedSupport webinars. Some excellent webinars on maximizing your impact at networking events, how resumes are evaluated in private sector, and a few others. So this is a wonderful service that you all are providing to federal employees, Katie. So hats off to you and Kirsten and all the folks at the partnership.
Thank you both. Thank you for your kind words, and we're just glad to be able to convene folks in a way that's helpful. So I would like to start by asking some questions. I will facilitate a dialogue and continue to look at the Q&A. Before I forget, to all of our attendees, you may hear from my colleague Kristen or see her in the chat, who will be joining us to help dig through your questions. So don't be shy, use that Q&A function. It is our intent today that attendees will leave this webinar with an increased understanding of how Encore entrepreneurship and late career transitions may work for them, thanks to the expertise and experience of Elisse and Jay. And I know some of you may be recently retired. We can certainly talk about that too. I think these topics absolutely apply to folks who are still seeking full-time roles or who have retired and are seeking perhaps entrepreneurship, volunteership, or starting their own business. So with that, to get us started, and this question is for both of you, but what are some special considerations for folks who are later in their career, perhaps at a more senior role, if they are starting to seek roles outside of the federal government? What would you say to them?
Do you want to go ahead and start off?
Either one, whichever one of you would like to start, but what would you say are some special considerations for folks who are more senior, who are later in their career, who may be now seeking a career outside of federal government? So their next role may be private sector or just otherwise outside of the federal government.
Jay, you want to start?
Yeah, I can absolutely do that. First of all, know your value. I think a lot of us, after many, many years of federal service, are really, used to some of the, regular and routine aspects of our jobs, whether we're in, policy development or program management or financial management or whatever it is that you're doing. And private sector is very different. And, when I think about my own experience in transitioning to private sector, I don't think that I really knew or appreciated my own value, even as a senior executive. First of all, in public sector, in public sector, thank you all, first of all, for what you all do every day for the American people. You are respected and admired by many, many people. And the fact that you've stepped up and every one of you at some point in your career raised your hand and took the oath of office. It is, again, it's something that shows that, you believe in something bigger than yourself. And you should be proud of what you've done. And as you go into the transition of going into private sector, do your research in terms of your value and your brand, what you bring to the table, what's your value proposition, what's the impact going to be, and really why it is that you should be the one that they should select, whether it's another federal agency or even private sector. But I think knowing your value and worth is the piece of advice that I would leave folks with.
And I would say that two things. One, that you're going to have to connect the dots for the employer. They're not going to be able to do that for you. You're going to have to be able to make the case as to why your skills are transferable. You can't assume that they know or that they're going to. You have to make it very clear how what you've done in the federal government can translate into what they're doing in the private sector. And, that requires research and really thought on your part, so that you can clearly make that case. And then the other thing is, I like to tell people we need to log on and reboot about what we want our lives to look like at this stage in our lives, and not sort of just on automatic pilot assume that our work lives should look the same as they looked 15 years ago or 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Think about what it is that fits best for your life, your total life, not just your work life, but your total life now. And look at it as an opportunity to really make those things align for you right now, at the age you are now, because it can look very different from how it looked or what the answer would have been 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And so I think those are just two really important things I would say.
Thank you. Extremely important. Um, Jay, a question for you. What do you think what was your biggest challenge in transitioning to a post-government careers? I know you had your consulting business. What were some of the greatest challenges and how did you address them?
Well, first of all, for anyone who is retiring or leaving and thinking about starting a business, I would first of all encourage you to decompress and take some time off. Don't just like rush into, I got to start my business on Monday. I actually took off. It was close to 3 months. And I started to go to some classes. In Northern Virginia, there's a business partnership where they actually give classes that you can take in there. I think they're free or there's a nominal charge on different aspects of starting your business. So first of all, do your research and be prepared. And whether it's a community college or a state agencies, small business administration, take some classes around starting a business, and Elisse hit on something that was really key in her early response about alignment. And at this point in your career or life, you should do something that you really enjoy. Do something because you want to do it, not because you need to do it. And again, folks are on different paths or on different levels financially, and you may really need to work to bring in some income to maintain your lifestyle, and that's absolutely fine. But if you are at the point where, gee, I don't necessarily need it, but obviously I want to stay engaged and working and productive, to really get into something that you really enjoy. I enjoyed analytics. Data analytics was an area that I just gravitated to. I was a manpower management analyst for 20 years, even though I wasn't that good in math in school or college. And so when I retired and started my business, my consulting work was more around human capital analytics, HR analytics, and workforce planning, workforce structuring. I know we're probably not supposed to mention that three-letter word, DEI, anymore, but I did a lot of work on DEI analysis around recruiting talent. And again, it's because I enjoyed it. And so the question that may be asked later is, so why are you winding it down? Well, it started to feel more like work. And I then started to do some volunteer work also simultaneously and just kind of branched off doing volunteer work, which really resonated with me. I mean, at this point in my life, it is about giving back. And so I started to work with a nonprofit that does therapeutic horseback riding with individuals with disabilities. I've been volunteering with them for about 11 years now. I'm actually on the board. They were in some financial trouble a number of years ago and actually put together a partnership that bought a horse farm for this nonprofit to operate out of in Northern Virginia. So I like to tell people that I bought the farm, but I'm still here. But again, focus on what you enjoy. Do your homework before you do start a business. And there's a lot of resources that are out there to help you on the initial part of your journey.
And another way, I just want to add another way to do some research is through what Jay was talking about is volunteering. If there are organizations that are doing the kind of work that you're interested in, where you can volunteer or sit on the board, those can often lead to jobs, often lead to opportunities for you to join the staff, because any employer is trying to reduce their risk of bringing in an unknown. And if they have gotten an opportunity to know you and know your dedication to the organization and your skill set, because you have been volunteering and indicating how committed you are to their purpose. When that opening comes along, they're going to reach for someone they know. So if there are organizations that you admire, whose work you admire, who, they're involved in causes that really resonate with you in terms of, how it feels good in your heart, that they are doing what they're doing, that can also lead to, employment opportunities.
That's awesome. Jay, it's interesting you talked about the entrepreneur class that you were able to access. I just happened to be on a call today for another totally different part of my role at the partnership, but was on the phone with someone who works at a chamber of commerce in Florida. And he mentioned that they offer free entrepreneurship classes and started telling me about some success stories from that. And I don't even remember how it came up in conversation, but it's a good reminder that there are free resources or accessible resources if you want to become an entrepreneur, or if you are going into a new sector. Elise, I'd love to hear more, but I wanted to ask both of you to talk a little bit more about what resources folks may be able to access like that, or go deeper if they want to start their own business, or if they're looking for career support. And Elise, maybe we could start with you, since you offer that career support piece that's so critical.
Yes, yes. And, for me, finding a mentor, when I first started doing LinkedIn training in Montgomery County, everyone kept saying, do you know this particular person? Do you know this person? Do you know this person? And she's kind of had cornered the market on LinkedIn training in Montgomery County. And so sometimes people say, well, she's your competition. No, she's not. She's a colleague who's going to mentor me into the business, because I can then support her and she can support me to go after larger contracts, because it's difficult as a solopreneur to go after large contracts. But if you have other people that who can be a part of your team, then that allows you to go for bigger and bigger contracts. But also, when she happened to decide she was going to, she got an offer she couldn't refuse from a company. So she went on staff, but she didn't want to completely abandon her clients. She referred them to me. So I picked up her business because she knew, what kind of work I was doing. So, part of the education process as well is getting to know people who are already doing what you want to do, who are a step or two ahead of where you want to be, and to approach them to learn about, if they were starting all over again, what would they do? What area would they focus on? Sort of doing the same kind of informational interviews that we recommend to job seekers, doing that as a potential business owner as well. And learning from their experience. People love to talk about their journey, whether it's their career journey or their entrepreneurial journey, and they will share that kind of information with you that can be really, really helpful to you as you move forward. So again, not looking at them as competitors, but as colleagues and sources of information.
Thanks, Elise. Jay, anything to add?
No, I think we've covered the resources. You mentioned Chamber of Commerce, which is excellent. The organization in Northern Virginia, it's called the Community Business Partnership. You can check out their website. A number of state agency or a number of state small business agencies, SBAs, also provide classes, as well as community colleges. Again, with anything, the prep work is going to really determine how successful you are. Or you may find out, after going to classes that, gee, this really is not going to be a good fit for me. As Elise said, I mean, you want it to be a good fit because this is a time in your, life and career where you should be really focused on doing things that you enjoy to do, that resonate with you. And that again, you can get fully behind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also, of course, SCORE, which has been around a long time, the Service Corps of Retired Executives. So.
Awesome. Thank you. That is wonderful. On the topic of entrepreneurship, some folks are asking, how do you know if your business concept is competitive? How do you take the risk and get clients? And a related question, how do you find that balance of aligning your mission of your business with your client base? So for example, perhaps your intended client base within the realm of your expertise doesn't always have a ton of funding. So how do you kind of balance your values, the risk? How do you know how competitive your business will be in the market? What would you say to that as business owners yourselves?
Do you want to go first, Jay?
Yeah, let me go ahead and I'll take a shot.
Okay.
My area of analytics, whether it's business analytics or HR analytics, I knew that there was a demand for it. And of course, having been around from the federal government for a number of years, and having actually worked with a number of private businesses in this space, I had a good feel for again what the demand was in federal government. The big decision that I needed to make early on, and I would throw this out for others to consider, is do you want to go to work full time, or do you want to just do project work? Do you want to go work for another company as a W-2 employee, or again as a subcontractor, as a 1099? And Elise, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you started to do a lot of 1099 work early on, or have, and I did the same. So in my transition, I spoke to a couple of friends who I knew had small businesses, and were mentors of mine, whether they thought of themselves as mentors or not. And I said, hey, just give me some advice in terms of, putting together these proposals, and what's your success rate? How much time are you putting in on these? And after talking to a number of folks, that really told me that I did not want to be a prime on any contract, because they were spending an inordinate amount of time putting together proposals, and their success rate was about 10 to 15%. So for every 10 proposals they submitted, they were selected on one of them. And again, at this stage of my life, that was way too much work for not enough return on the investment. And so I made the decision to just really offer myself up as a sub, as a sole proprietor LLC. I didn't have any employees other than myself. And I, subbed to other companies who were doing the proposal work. And, again, whether they wanted it or not was immaterial to me. If they wanted, and they would ask me to come on the project, I would do so. But again, I did not want to be the prime. And the other thing I think Lisa mentioned early on is as a sole proprietor, I could be very selective in which projects I wanted to work on and not. And there were some that, listen, the money was really good. But as my dad used to tell me, which I never really understood when I was a young kid, my dad used to say, not all money is good money. And that didn't make any sense to me until later on in life. And so I said, no, I'm going to just work on the things that really pique my interest, whether or not, they're paying the same amount of money that some of these other offers came in on. So those were the initial hurdle was, again, did I want to go work full time for a company as a W-2? Did I want to start my own company? Did I want to be a prime or a sub? Katie, other aspects of the question that I may not have answered?
I think you got it.
Okay, awesome.
So, yeah, I'm still a 1099. First of all, I don't want to make this sound, be glib about this, like this is just easy. Everybody can just, step out and have a successful business. One of the major factors for me was that I was able to get on my husband's health insurance. So that was a huge issue of health insurance and whether I could get health insurance. Once I was able to get on his, then I could, move forward and not have to worry about that as an expense. And for me, it was seeing a need in the market, seeing something that was missing, a gap in the market. So as a job seeker, I attended a program that I now facilitate called the Career Gateway Program. So this is a good time for Kristen to drop this into the chat. I facilitate the Gateway Program run by the Jewish Council for the Aging for job seekers who are 50 and better to make them more competitive candidates. And we have, as a part of that program, a presentation by a recruiter about how they use LinkedIn. We also offer, JCA offers an online monthly employment expo with at least 12 employers, all of whom have current openings. It's completely free of charge. It's over Zoom. And they know that everyone on the Zoom, and it's often 400, 500 people, are all people 50 and better. So there's no, question about who's on this Zoom. And again, it's free of charge every month. So anyway, while doing that program, the recruiter came in and talked about LinkedIn, and I noticed that some people were kind of turning off. They were kind of like, I don't think I want to do this. And I had the opposite reaction, which was, oh my God, this is the best thing since sliced bread. And I grabbed them and said, look, grab your laptops, come to my house. We're going to figure out LinkedIn. We're going to figure it out. And I discovered I had a facility for teaching it. And I started literally teaching it around my kitchen table. After I did the first session, they went back and told other people that I had done this session, and they totally understood it. And it was like so much fun and all this. And so I did it starting out for free. And then it was like $10 for a 4-hour class. And then as I sort of built up my abilities, I wanted to charge more. But then I realized that job seekers did not have the money to pay me once I reached a certain level where I felt like I cannot give this away for $10 an hour or $40 an hour. And now they're having to make a choice between getting a pair of shoes or getting LinkedIn training. And I realized I was going to have to change my business model. And so then I started looking for organizations that were serving these people but could not provide LinkedIn training to them because they knew how to do resumes, they knew how to do interview prep and online job search, but what they did not know how to do was LinkedIn training. And so I approached my public library, who was tasked with, and many library systems are, tasked with providing employment support for people in the community. But they had to do something that was not already being offered at the American Job Centers. And LinkedIn training was something that the American Job Centers were not doing. They were not doing in-depth LinkedIn training. And so that sort of answered a need for the library system, but also gave me an opportunity to get it out of my house, but also not have the job seeker pay for the training. So I saw a gap in the market. I saw a need, something that was missing, particularly for people who are not digital natives, who have online security and privacy issues, who are used to having a person to interact with as opposed to learning from videos. This was something that would meet their needs. And so it has been, I now do that for the Montgomery County Public Library System. So that link should also be in the chat. That's available. It's free. You don't have to live in Montgomery County. It's offered the second Tuesday and Thursday of every month. I also do that training in partnership with the Westchester County, New York Library System as well. So anyway.
I love your story, Elise. Because it started literally in your living room, and then
yeah, around my kitchen table. My husband serving people coffee, me serving them fruit, and them saying, "Oh my gosh, you're feeding us and you're giving us fruit. We should pay you something." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not working, so I'm not going to turn down any money." And then I'm thinking, you know what? If I just got $1 from every baby boomer or, or somebody over 45, that's $75 million. I think I can make this work, So yeah.
No, it's awesome and inspiring. And I love how you share that there was a problem you were trying to solve, and then you found a creative solution to work with a partner to do it. So it's an awesome story. And I thank you for sharing it. We've talked a lot about entrepreneurship, and there's been a lot of questions in the chat. So I think it has been appreciated and will continue. I do want to shift gears, at least momentarily, to folks who may still be on the traditional job search. I have gotten a lot of questions, and Jay and Elise, I know we talked about this. It's a difficult question, but what would you say to folks who are feeling nervous about ageism? And one person even said, please be brutally honest, but how do you approach the workplace when you in a job search when you are more senior in your career? And that's for both of you, whoever would like to start.
You start this one, Elise.
Okay. Do you want me to start, Jay? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I work with job seekers who are 50 and better. I train at least 120 of them every year. And what I hope they understand when they fill out the initial questionnaire, a lot of them cite ageism as the reason they're not getting jobs. And what I hope happens over the course of the 2-week program is they realize that they're actually not as good of candidates as they thought they were. And that isn't to discourage them. That is to let them see that they have control over that is something they have control over. They have no control over what other people think about them, but they totally have control over how good a candidate they are. And so that's something that they can fix. And sometimes some of the ageism is the biggest problem is self-directed ageism, where they say, I'm too old to do XYZ, or I'm too old for this or that, right? So first they have to deal with their own ageism, where they have decided that they're too old to pursue whatever they want to pursue, for example, in their next career, or that, there are no jobs out there for them at this age, right? So that, once they get past their own, then they can help somebody else see that, and then sometimes it's self-inflicted. Like they say, well, I'm a communication specialist or a marketing person. And I say, okay, well, what social media do you specialize in? And they say, oh, I don't do social media. And I'm like, how can you possibly say you do marketing in 2025 and you don't do social media? But that's, you can go on YouTube and learn how to do Instagram or something, certificate programs are also great for quickly updating your skills at low cost. There's so many online programs from really good universities, actually, where you can now add that to your resume by doing a certificate program from, Stanford or the Ohio State University, right? And add that to your resume. A lot of it is really just understanding what you have control over. And also saying to yourself, if a employer is making an important decision about who they bring on their team based on hair color, this is not an employer I want to work for. Because there will people who come to work with green hair on Monday and purple hair on Tuesday and yellow hair on Friday. And if they don't have a problem with that, but they have a problem with your gray hair, that's not an employer I want to work for. And I have people ask me, do you recommend that your participants dye their hair? And I say, no, not at all. You want to be authentically who you are. I have earned every single gray hair I have. I'm very proud of them. I've earned every single one of them. And if you're going to make a decision, an important hiring decision based on my hair color, I don't want to work for you.
I knew I did not want to follow Elise in this response. Now that was awesome, Elise. I'm not going to add to it, but I want to reinforce some of the things that she said. I'm a note taker, so I'm taking notes as Elise is talking, and I just want to reinforce some of the things she said. It is about staying up to date in your field and being relevant, and even the terminology that's used. So make sure that you've done that. And I'll give you an example. I don't know how well it applies to the situation, but I don't know, maybe it was about a year ago. I was in a seminar and someone used the term homeless, and someone else said, well, we don't use that term anymore. We use unhoused. And I had never heard of unhoused before, so I wrote it down, took note of it and had to research it. And of course, that now is the relevant term that's used now in that space. So you got to stay relevant with the lingo, the terminology. As a hiring official myself, and I hired, a number of 15s as well as interns. And it depends. So, at the more senior level, whether it's 13, 14, 15, you expect folks to be, more senior in age because you are looking for people with experience. But what I also looked for were people who really focused on continuously learning. I'm really, really big on continuous learning and try and practice it myself. And so when I'm looking at a resume, I'm looking at, yeah, what have you done, within the last several years in terms of whether it's a certificate or gone off to a university program, or there are a number of agencies, whether it's DOD or Commerce or Transportation, who have leader development programs, whether it's for aspiring leaders at the 7, 9, 11 level, or executive potential program members who apply at the 12, 13, 14 level. So again, it's continuous learning, making sure you stay up to date with the current lingo. And Elisse used one of my favorite words, which is authenticity. You have to be authentic. You have to be yourself. If you try to be someone else who you're not, whether it's in the interview process or any other aspect of your life or job, it's just not going to work out well for you, because you're going to be in a role that's going to be very uncomfortable, because it's not who you are. So come to the job authentic. That's who we want you to be and show up every day, whether you've got tattoos or piercings or purple colored hair or whatever it is. Come as yourself. And let me just add also that you obviously have to show a compelling reason why the selecting official wants to hire you. And one of the things that I would encourage participants in this webinar is to go and look, if you haven't already, OPM's model for the Senior Executive Service Program for ECQs is called the CCAR model. It's challenge, context, action, and result. And really what it talks about, what are some of the key challenges that you've faced on the job, the context of the challenge itself, what's the action that you took, and what are the results that were achieved. And of course, being able to quantify those results as a data guy is really, really important. And part of that is building, your value proposition and the business case for why Elisse wants to hire me. Like, she's looking at me and it's like, there's something about Jay I don't like, the fact that he has an earring, in his right ear. But oh my gosh, his paperwork is amazing in terms of the projects and actions he's taken on, the results he's achieved, the certification courses he's gone to, or whatever else it is to help, build his or her resume out.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly add, often we as older job seekers try to sell our experience as opposed to our expertise. And it's not that we don't have it, but expertise is more important than experience, because experience doesn't speak to the quality of your work. It's not how long you've done something, but how well you do something. And we know that the market values expertise over experience, because people who have much less experience than us are getting hired ahead of us, right? So it's our expertise that they want, not our experience. So just saying 35 plus years of professional experience, all you've told me is you're old and you worked. And that's not a compelling reason to hire you. What I really want to know is, what are you good at? What are you so good at that I would be willing to pay you salary and benefits to do it for me? And just saying I did it a long time is not enough. That doesn't speak to the quality of your work. And that's what I want to know. Are you any good?
I hadn't thought about that in that context, Elise, and thanks for that. Because yeah, I think this CCAR model that I referenced is a great way for you to demonstrate your expertise.
Yes. Yes.
As opposed to I survived. 34 years in federal service. Why would you not want to hire me?
No, and in our
Great
program,
point.
we call it the STAR method or the PAR method: the problem, the action, the result. Or the STAR method: the situation, the task, the action, and the result.
Mhm.
And often people will tell their stories and they'll get to the situation, the task, the action, but they won't tell the result. They miss a part of the story that's really, really important. Like, what happened after you did all this? So they get stuck on, yeah, then I did this and this and this and this. Is like, yeah, and so how did your employer benefit from that? What did they get out of it, right? So yes, it's again the expertise that we want. And I mean, we literally go through and say, cross out experience and put expertise. Cross out experience and put expertise. You're trying to sell something the market doesn't want.
And so you started to answer my next question, but we're getting a lot in the chat, folks who have been in their role for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And this is a question we've heard a lot from federal employees that, they feel that their positions are highly specialized or, it may be difficult to translate outside of a federal context. So what would you both say to folks who are going into a job search for the first time in a while? They are highly experienced, but also have expertise. And how should they approach that job search from networking, LinkedIn, interviews, so that it does go beyond that? I have 25 years of relevant experience.
Well, I mean, one of the things is the whole quantifying piece that Jay talked about. And I know it's not natural. It's not comfortable. It's a muscle you have to kind of build up over time by practicing. But you can quantify everything. You can quantify the number of steps you take, the number of times you breathe in in a 10-minute. I mean, you can put numbers to everything. But it's not something that comes naturally. So it really takes practicing that skill over and over again to tease things out. Did you work with 4 agencies or 5 agencies? Did you work, was your document 600 pages or 60 pages? Was your budget $40 million or $50 million? And people say, well, it sounds like it's not bragging if it's a fact. Either you worked in 7 countries or you didn't. That's not bragging, that's a fact. Saying that you are innovative and creative is mushy bragging. Saying I worked in 7 countries for 4 agencies in a 6-month period where we built 7, wells and that serviced 4 communities of, 1,000 people in each community. That's not bragging, that's a fact, right? And there's a big difference between the two. So, again, saying, I'm an experienced, seasoned fiscal manager with a variety of experience in a number of settings. You've told me nothing, right? So again, the more you can quantify, it's also going to help that potential manager be more comfortable that you're the right person for this slot because you have done the work for them. You've taken the guesswork out for them and they know, oh yes, this is my person because they've done it before and they can do it again.
Yeah, and what I would add to that as well is, of course, it depends if you're looking to transition from a current federal position to another federal position or outside of government into private sector. So I'll try and keep my comments somewhat generic so that it applies to both. But I would encourage folks to do a little bit of research about the organizations that they are trying to. I hate to use the word target, but target. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir that you all would kind of do this anyway. But I've known a number of folks who just kind of wing it. And so when I say research, so as an example, if I wanted to go apply for a job at the JCA with Elisse, I would probably go out to the website and start to look at some of their foundational documents, like do they have a strategic plan? What are their goals and objectives? What's the mission? And then figure out where do I fit in? Where can I add value? And then look to whether it's your resume or whatever else, to tailor that to show how what I do really nests well within what it is your organization's, again, goal, mission, strategy is. And oh, by the way, this is what I've done with regard to expertise in the past through my accomplishments, which can help you be successful. And again, you're trying to sell yourself. There's a form that businesses use. It's called a capability statement, and it kind of basically shows what the organization's areas of expertise are and what they've done in the past and what they've accomplished. After about 2 to 3 years of having my own business, I had to develop a capability statement to do some sub work for folks. But I also looked at how I would have tailored that into like a resume if I'm applying for jobs. Again, doing your homework, seeing how you can support the organizations that you're applying to, how well you nest in what it is they're trying to achieve, and then building, your story. Tell a story, through your resume and your career and your accomplishments and your expertise, and really have that story to be so compelling that I think Elise said, like I have to hire this person. If we were slicing bread in this company, they would be the best bread slicer. We would solve for world hunger, and really sell yourself. Part of it is the paperwork, and again, I talked about some of the other FedSupport webinars, which are excellent. The application or your resume is going to get you in the door, but the interview is going to be the thing that's going to actually sell you. And the resume is so important because it's so important to get a consideration to be able to walk into the door. But being able to, quote unquote, sell yourself in an interview is also so important. And they're so very different. Like, you don't want to go into an interview and just regurgitate what's in your resume because they've already read it. And one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, and I just want to make sure that I get it in before we have to end the session, is how important it is to the skill set of connecting with people. And I thought about this webinar and what some of the potential questions would be, and what would be some of the challenges in the transition. And one of the key skill sets that I've found, whether it was in my federal career or even outside, is this ability to connect with people, the dynamics of interpersonal relations. Listen, the fact of the matter is, within federal government, most senior positions, at the 14, 15 level, selections are made of people that are already known. And I'm not talking about pre-selection. It's just that it's very rare that someone, for lack of a better description, takes a chance on an employee. I actually did that one time with the GS-15, and it did not work out well. As I've reflected back on my career, I've had many successes and a couple of failures, and that was literally the one of the worst decisions I made in terms of personnel selection. It was for GS-15. And it was for a new position that we were establishing, and it was for an occupational series that did not exist in the organization. And so we had to hire from outside. And it was paneled with individuals in that area of expertise. And again, I made a selection that didn't work out well. But the individual and I connected on a very interpersonal level. And I don't want to undermine what I'm saying here, but this the skill to connect with individuals is so important, whether it's transitioning to another federal job or even in the world of entrepreneurship. It's not just the paperwork and the resume and the capability statement. It's this interpersonal connection that is absolutely key, and a skill set that, again, if you're more of an introvert, you've got to work on trying to open up. And again, I almost feel like I'm on the partnership's payroll, but go look at some of the earlier webinars. There was some excellent material on networking. And in particular, I think there was a section where they talked about individuals who may be more introvert in nature and how to deal with that, who may struggle with that.
Yeah, and I'd say LinkedIn is great for introverts, because it gives you an opportunity to think about what your response is, to begin the conversation online before the person is staring down your throat while you're trying to think of something to say. You can begin the conversation online where you're more comfortable. And I also think it's important to follow organizations online that you're interested in, to see how they're presenting themselves. How are they trying to what image are they trying to portray to the world, so that you can mimic that back to them in the interview. Do your research on who this company is, how they're trying to present themselves. If you can, connect with someone who already works there to get some insider information. They might even help you tailor your resume. And give you insider information. They might even give it to the hiring manager, give it to the recruiting person, and they give you intel so that you can present yourself the best possible way. And we often underestimate who can and will help us. We think, oh, that person doesn't really know me all that well. It's so people get a thrill out of helping someone. Don't rob them of the opportunity to get that wonderful, powerful feeling of being able to help someone. People don't want to feel used, but they also enjoy being able to help. So again, I say to people, don't have the first word out of your mouth be, do you know of any jobs? Do you know of any jobs? All that says is, if you can't tell me about any jobs, then you're of no value to me. But people can always share their guidance, their insights, their journey, their experience. And through that, you get an opportunity to learn, but they also get an opportunity to learn about you, and they will share information with you that they wouldn't necessarily put in writing, but that can be very, very helpful to you in terms of making a decision about, is this a company I want to work for? Is this an opportunity I want to apply for? So again, companies that you're interested in, visit their website, try to connect with people who work there through LinkedIn and other sources, through your mutual connections. Get as much information as you can, because these are steps that a lot of other people who are applying for these jobs are not taking. And that's the way that you can become a much better applicant than just the people who are just throwing out resume after resume after resume.
All incredible advice. I'm so grateful for it's difficult to pack everything into an hour, and it went so quickly. Everything you both said was so important. And Elisse, I'll just share, I unfortunately, I too know a lot of folks who have been affected by rifts in the federal government. And a number of folks that I'm close to have said that they have maybe put on LinkedIn, perhaps, this is what's happened. I'm seeking networking, conversations, support, ideas, and they've been blown away by the folks who have come forward and said, yeah, I'll get on the phone with you for 30 minutes and just kind of share what I do and ideas I have for you, or just hear you out. One person in particular, I think, said someone from college like 30 years ago that they
Yes.
hadn't even talked to in
Yes.
many years. To your point, I think by nature, most people really want to help, but you have to ask for that help and do it in that interpersonal way that Jay was talking about as well. So, and so much of our conversation tonight was career development focused, and Jay and Elisse are incredible folks to talk us through those topics. I do just want to spotlight that the partnership, we do have a free resource called the Career Pivot Bootcamp. Perhaps some of you have done it, but it is a fully online asynchronous resource, and it has modules on many of the things that we talked about. So there's a module on resumes. There's a module on translating your skills in the private sector. There's a module on interviews. There's a module on networking. Elisse was actually kind enough to be one of our guest speakers, so you'll see her again. But please, it's free. It's on our website. Kristen's going to drop it in the chat, but it's just a great structured way to go through your job search. So we are almost out of time, which is difficult, but I just want to take a moment and first thank you both for being here, and I'll give you a last word or an opportunity to give a last word. But before we do that, your feedback is really important. I thank you all for being here. We want to make sure that the information we provide at these webinars is effective and helpful to you. So if you all could just take a moment, Kristen's going to share a poll, and it looks like there it is, and just let us know how effective this webinar was for you and what topics you'd like to see in the future. And please know that we take these really seriously. With that, Jay and Elisse, you each have about a minute. What final words of advice would you like to share with our participants tonight? And thank you again for being here.
Jay?
Okay. Thank you, Elisse, and thanks, Katy, for inviting me to this session. My goal when I'm teaching classes is, I always said that I hope everyone walks away with at least one gold nugget. So hopefully everyone has gotten one gold nugget from something that either Elisse or myself has said. Not so much advice, but I want to say that this really is a time for folks, I think, to give yourself some grace. You all are in a tough situation. Many of you all, through no fault of your own. And again, I mentioned how much I appreciate and respect everything that you all do as public servants. But show yourself some grace. We're very often good at showing others, but not ourselves. You may not know your next step. It's probably very unclear. You know, the light may not be shining on the path right in front of you, but many of you, to include myself, in my career, have had some real challenges. And somehow, you know, we have come through those, and you will as well. The last thing I would say is that, again, I am a little bit long in the tooth in terms of a career and a life and everything else. And so, lastly, I would say to think about, what do you want your legacy to be? Like, what do you want people to remember you for? No one's going to remember that, oh, you know, Jay was the deputy assistant secretary, blah, 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 blah. I think we all want people to say that, you know, so-and-so was a really great person, or whatever. But think about your legacy, and that really should drive a lot of your decisions going forward, you know, depending on where you're at in your career. My son-in-law gave me a quote, actually not too long ago, that really resonated with me. It's by Charles Dickens, and I gotta read it. I got it actually taped up here on my wall, and it's no one is useless in this world who lightens the burden of another. And so, again, you all are doing such useful things for the American sector, the American people. Continue to, again, serve the folks who you all have taken an oath to do so, and continue to do so honorably. And again, I think that through grace and providence, that you all will come out on the positive end, you know, from the period or the time that we're working through right now.
Yeah, and I just want to echo everything that Jay said. And again, just, you know, examine the voice in your head and make sure that it's helpful. Whatever that voice is saying to you, make sure that it is as kind to you as it would be to other people. Don't let it say things to you that you wouldn't say to other people. And, you know, be open to pursuing something you didn't think you would ever do if it makes you happy. I mean, ultimately, it's about, are you happy, right? I remember when I decided I wasn't going to pursue law, and people were like, "Well, my gosh, you know, you spent all that time in law school and you spent all that money." And I said, you know, what part of I wasn't happy as a lawyer don't you understand? Right? This is my career, my life. I get to do what I want. You know, I made a decision at 22 to go to law school. I'm supposed to be miserable the rest of my life. So maybe this part of your career won't look like what you expected, but if you are happy, then it's worth it. If you're happy, then that's what it's all about. So give yourself permission. We have more freedom than we think we do to pursue what we want. So use this, think of this as an opportunity to really do what it is you really want to do. And you will be able to make a living at it. If you believe that, you can make it happen.
Wow. This was awesome. And I'm just so thankful to you both, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart. And thank you all for being here. For those of you that joined us as participants this evening, we're really grateful for your time and wish you all the best. We know that you are busy and appreciate you taking the time. Don't forget to visit our FedSupport website for federal employees. In the meantime, as Jay has referenced, you can find previous webinars, but there's all kinds of FAQs and blogs and additional resources. That's also where that Career Pivot Bootcamp online course I mentioned can be found as well. Thank you once again, Jay and Elisse, for your time and your expertise and experience, but I know now expertise I will always look at differently, Elisse. And for all the federal employees out there, I'll just say it one more time. Thank you for your service to our country. It's incredibly important and meaningful, and we're just so grateful. Thank you, everyone, for being with us, and have a good evening.